You've probably felt this before. You explain something carefully, clearly, patiently, and somehow the person in front of you still looks at you like you just spoke a different language. You simplify it. You use examples. You try a new angle. They nod. They say they understand. But a few minutes later, it's obvious. They never understood the core idea at all. And that's when the question hits you. How is this even possible? How can someone hear the same words, see the same evidence, and still completely miss the point? For a long time, this confused people, until one philosopher reached a brutally honest conclusion. Arthur Schopenhauer believed the answer was simple. Most people are not truly thinking, not deeply, not critically. And once you understand that, the entire world suddenly starts making a lot more sense. Look closely at how people actually process information. You present logic. They respond with slogans. You present evidence. They answer with emotion. You explain a chain of reasoning. They reply with what everyone knows. They're not really engaging with your argument. They're defending beliefs that were installed long before the conversation began. Beliefs they never examined. Beliefs they never questioned. Beliefs they never chose. Schopenhauer realized something uncomfortable about human intelligence. Most people don't analyze ideas. They repeat them. They memorize. They echo what they absorb from their environment. Family, friends, culture, authority. And when those beliefs are challenged, something strange happens. Logic doesn't trigger curiosity. It triggers defense. Because the argument isn't about truth, it's about protecting identity. Which is why arguing with someone who cannot think critically often feels like talking to a wall. You're trying to exchange ideas. They're trying to defend programming. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Your expectations change. You stop expecting deep thought from people who were never trained to think deeply. You stop expecting curiosity from people who only learned repetition. Schopenhauer captured this idea in one unsettling sentence. A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. In other words, people act according to their nature, and most human behavior is driven less by reasoning and more by instinct, emotion, habit, social pressure. Look around. How are most decisions actually made? Not through careful analysis, but through fear, anger, belonging, approval. People follow crowds. They copy confidence. They trust authority. Because thinking critically takes effort. And effort is rare. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The people who understand the least are often the most confident. Centuries before psychology gave it a name, Schopenhauer noticed this strange pattern. The less someone understands, the harder they defend their beliefs. Present contradictory evidence, they dismiss it. Expose a logical flaw, they ignore it. Prove them wrong, they double down. Because recognizing your own limitations requires the very ability you lack. This is what modern psychology calls the Dunning-Kruger effect. Ignorance often walks hand in hand with confidence, which explains a mystery you've probably noticed many times. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most thoughtful one. And this leads to another powerful realization. People rarely arrive at beliefs through logic. They arrive through emotion. Then they build logic afterward to justify it. Fear shapes opinions. Anger shapes judgments. Insecurity shapes criticism. The reasoning you hear later is often just a costume. Because you cannot reason someone out of a belief they never reasoned themselves into. You're not debating logic. You're confronting emotion. And emotions do not surrender to evidence. Now add one more layer. Groups. Something strange happens when people enter a crowd. Individually, someone might show moments of clarity. But inside a group, thinking changes. Belonging becomes more important than truth. Agreement becomes more valuable than accuracy. Independent thought fades. Tribal loyalty rises. Crowds reward confidence, not correctness. Emotion, not logic. Which is why public debates rarely produce truth. They produce applause. And here's the part most people struggle to accept. Truth is uncomfortable. Real truth forces change. It forces you to admit mistakes. It forces you to abandon comforting illusions. So most people choose something easier: comfort. Everything happens for a reason. It will all work out. It's fate. These ideas soothe people, but soothing and truth are not the same thing. For many, emotional comfort will always defeat intellectual honesty. And if you spend enough time trying to argue with people who refuse to think, something subtle begins to happen to you. You start simplifying more and more. You compress nuance. You reduce complexity. And eventually the argument itself becomes shallow. They didn't rise to your level, you descended to theirs. Which is why Schopenhauer offered a radical piece of advice: stop trying to convince everyone. Some people cannot understand you. Not because they refuse, but because their mental framework simply doesn't support that level of abstraction. You cannot explain color to someone who has never seen. You cannot explain depth to someone who only sees flat surfaces. No amount of explanation changes the structure of perception, and accepting that reality can feel harsh at first. But it is also liberating, because once you stop expecting deep thought everywhere, you stop feeling constant frustration. You stop wasting energy on unwinnable debates. You begin choosing your conversations more carefully. And you start noticing something else. True intelligence is rare, very rare. When you find someone who genuinely listens, questions their own beliefs, follows logic wherever it leads, it stands out immediately. Those minds are uncommon, which is why intelligence often comes with an unexpected side effect: loneliness. The clearer you see patterns, the fewer people see them with you. Most conversations feel shallow, most arguments feel circular, most debates feel pointless. Schopenhauer himself preferred solitude to constant intellectual compromise, not out of arrogance, but out of exhaustion. And yet, he also offered a strategic solution. Don't advertise your intelligence everywhere, because clarity can threaten people. Your insight exposes their confusion, your reasoning reveals their shortcuts, and people rarely enjoy mirrors that show their limitations, so they respond defensively. You're arrogant. You think you're smarter than everyone. Schopenhauer suggested something smarter: strategic discretion, not hiding your intelligence out of shame, but revealing it selectively. Full depth with the rare few who can meet you there. Simpler language with everyone else, not deception. Efficiency, because once you understand how most people think, you stop trying to change them. And instead, you begin predicting them. You know they respond to emotion more than logic, confidence more than competence, belonging more than truth, and that predictability becomes power. While others argue emotionally, you move strategically. You don't need to convince the majority. You simply understand the system they create, and position yourself wisely within it. In the end, Schopenhauer left us with one final observation. The wise have always said the same things. The fools, who are the majority, have always done the opposite. Human nature doesn't change very much. Most people will continue choosing comfort over truth, emotion over analysis, belonging over accuracy. You cannot fix that. You cannot argue it away, but you can understand it. And once you truly accept that reality, something surprising happens. You stop being frustrated by the absence of intelligence, because you no longer expect it everywhere. You conserve your energy. You choose your battles. You share your depth, only with those capable of meeting it. And you move through the world with something far more valuable than constant arguments: clarity. Not bitterness, not arrogance, just clarity. Because peace doesn't come from changing humanity. It comes from seeing it exactly as it is and acting accordingly.
Thanks for watching. If this video inspired you, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to Story Sage TV so you never miss our latest uplifting stories. Until next time, stay connected to your soul and live your life to the fullest.